George, thank you very much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since being made aware of your really beautiful work, I've enjoyed numerous videos on YouTube and I've been really looking forward to seeing where we go today.
Likewise, Mark, privileged to be with you. Really excited about the community you're building. And so, yeah, excited to see where this conversation goes.
So we jump straight in with, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
So, I'm wearing the t shirt for those who are watching the video, and my organization is Balance is Possible. And a question that I really dedicated my life to is what is balance? And for me, that is a really important question for my own healing, for the healing that I see is possible for us as people, and then as a collective, as a species. Because we are really in the sea of a society and a culture that separates and divides certain areas of life. So, you've got, we're top heavy. It's like our heads are so big that we topple over because we're very focused on becoming smarter and more intelligent. And, for me, I was disembodied. I was just thinking I was a little voice in my head in a flesh robot walking around. And what I've learned in the journey that I'm sure we'll explore is that I am an embodied being, not just this voice in my head. And so then there is a relationship, there is a balance coming from my mind, my heart, my body. The really, if I look at myself holistically, there are new insights that I gain that I would have missed if I just focused on self-development, trying to become smarter, because the relationships, really a lot of the juice is there. And the same is true on the collective level as well. I studied economics at university. Economics means household management in Greek, and we've got really good at managing the household. And yet there's more floods outside the household and there's forest fires, and we're beginning to wonder why. We've got robots doing the dishes and the clothes inside the house, and yet there's carnage outside. That's because we have forgotten as a culture and the economic discipline to step outside of the household and to see that the house rests on the earth, and the relationship between the economy and the earth is so fundamental. So then what does balance look like between those two? These are the sort of questions that I'm deeply passionate about.
Just, it sounds like a ridiculous question, but I just love the way you phrased it. So, when did you first realize that the house resided on an earth?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I studied economics at Nottingham University, and my year had 300 people. And a lot of these people would go on to become bankers and financiers and consultants in the great capitalist machine. And I remember, I was already an environmentalist uh, going into that degree. I remember in my first year macroeconomics course, first lecture, packed lecture hall. Excuse me, sir, asking a question. When are we going to talk about the planet upon which the whole economy depends? And he says, that's an optional third year module. It's just baffling. It's like the planet upon which the whole thing depends is an optional third year module. And so thousands and thousands of economic students are brainwashed in neoliberal propaganda for years and decades and centuries without a real understanding of that it's an ecology. There's a relationship here between the economy. Nature's just seen as natural resources, as if they're Lego blocks. They're assumed to be infinite to then come into the economy to be transformed into something useful, monetary goods and services. So I always had a sense and a love of nature, but as I really learned more in my degree and seeing increasing climate breakdown and mass inequality, that there's really something fundamentally missing in how we understand our place in the universe.
There's something gorgeous about the realization that a home or a household exists on a planet, and then also that your head resides on a body which isn't necessarily just a machine.
Mm,
It's kind of it's staggering once you've explored that for a while that could ever be a way in which we perceive it. But so much of what you're saying resonates with me as well. Can you give me a sense of even just that moving into that exploration of, okay, I'm not just this almost, this head or computation system residing on top of a body, and kind of what that entailed for you?
Mm. It's fascinating because take the spiritual, mystical experience. So, Muhammad had a deep, profound sense of presence and insight of Allah, God, coming and giving him divine revelation, which then became the Quran. The Buddha, having the same experience of deep presence and maybe thoughts of clarity as to the nature of suffering, saw that as the mind being empty and then that wisdom coming from this kind of no self. Arguably, same experience, deep presence, oneness with the universe, and then those experiences are then interpreted based on the cultural background and heritage that both these people had. Muhammad having the idea of there being a deity God that could speak directly to you and you have a relationship with, whereas the Buddha having a more organismic, can never say that word, view of the universe where there isn't a deity that is above or superior to humanity. So the experience for us is the same. Like me experiencing my life is the same as it was 15 years ago, but the cultural water that I was swimming in at that time told me that the universe is unconscious. We're just a bunch of random particles bashing together. And then through the process of evolution, all these particles became more and more complex. Consciousness emerged. Really, we're just big, lumbering flesh robot machines. And the meaning that we think we have is not actually real meaning. It's just an illusion created by all these unconscious particles bashing together. Sleep well. It's like it's quite a depressing understanding of the universe, and no wonder why so many people are feeling lost in really understanding their place in the cosmos. Now, okay, I still have thoughts that come into my mind, but I no longer see myself as just, this kind of aberration of consciousness in an otherwise unconscious universe. I no longer see these thoughts as just a disembodied psyche, like a little man residing in my brain. Instead, now I see, wow, this is a part of consciousness. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, all arising and passing in the field of me. I'm not just my thoughts, and not every thought I have is true. So, there's been a journey of that, and really meditation is the core practice to really see this clearly. And it has been a radical transformation in how I understand myself.
What can you give me a sense of almost the state that was experienced and preceded prior to that? I'm always really intrigued, almost as now. I know oftentimes it can be suffering in different ways for people, but just even a sentiment or like a feeling of where it was, and what was it that even led to that jumping into it point, if you know what I mean, like the kind of what was almost the movement towards it.
I like to summarize the journey of waking up in three sentences. To hurt is to be human, balance is possible, practice is the path. My journey started in anxiety and confusion, finishing university, being single, not many friends, working for Deliveroo, delivering food on my bike, and living with my parents, feeling isolated and lonely. And a new character began to dominate my headspace, who I personified as a troubled wizard called the Underminer, who would say, hey, George, still single, not many friends. Oh, and now you're anxious. You're pathetic, weak. And I really didn't understand how to relate to that voice. And I knew something needed to change because all that had happened really is I was by myself for a few months after university, but I really didn't have that awareness. So to hurt is to be human. Often this journey of waking up to the nature of consciousness and the nature of our true identity starts in pain because it's okay, something's hurting and I want to change. That then took me to China, and I had watched some videos of monks doing backflips, doing kung fu, and I thought, hey, that will make me stronger. And I went to the Wudang Mountains, which is the home place of Wudang Kung Fu and Tai Chi. I turned up at a monastery, big courtyard, sweaty roofs, a monk sweeping the floor, an old woman. I go up to her and say, Ni hao, Kung Fu. She just pauses and looks at me with a baffled look and then shoos me away. I go up to another old lady monk carrying tea. I say, Ni hao, Kung Fu. She shoos me away. Turns out it wasn't a Kung Fu monastery. It was a female only Daoist academic monastery, and foreigners weren't allowed to come in anyway. So I had
And
done
here
my
you were.
had done my research very badly. Just some English bloke from Bristol turning up randomly trying to get in to something that wasn't even a Kung Fu monastery to begin with. But that opened me up to the possibility of the unknown supporting me. So I asked the locals to take me to a Kung Fu school, and they ended up taking me to a Tai Chi school. And in my ignorance, I thought, Tai Chi is this for older people? But I tried it, fell in love with it, found Taoist philosophy, found Tai Chi and meditation, and that began to change everything.
you you just said something absolutely gorgeous there. That was your first sense of the unknown supporting me.
Mm.
Can you elaborate on that?
The embrace and welcoming of the unknown is one of the great gifts that Taoist philosophy gives to the collective wisdom of humanity. And really, uncertainty is something that we as humans and I as a human resist and push away because particularly our thinking cognitive mind wants to think through all possibilities in order to keep us safe. But the problem is that we live in an infinite universe and our noggin is only 30 centimeters wide. And so we will never totally work out every possible scenario. And if we try to, it just leads to anxiety. And it's like rope burn. We grip on to certainty. Right, this is how the world works. This is who I am. Even if it's painful, it's causing friction and rope burn. At least I know who I am. And so we stay trapped in rigidity and certainty and identity. The Taoists often use the metaphor of water flowing like a river. And they remind us that if we let go of control, if we fall, but it doesn't mean that we are hurt. Like we fall into the unknown, but then the unknown holds us and supports us. So it's almost like a mini ego death. The thinking mind wants to hold on to certainty, and we can ironically use the mind to say, hey, I actually am going to embrace uncertainty and let go and let down. And as we do that, then we begin to train our thinking mind that it's okay and that we are safe. And then we can flow like the river. So, okay, adapting and changing as the world inevitably changes, then no longer are we just rigidly bouncing off the sides of the riverbank. We're gliding.
There's a real beautiful sentiment in that, though, as well. The idea of we're falling, we can fall, but we are not hurt.
Mm,
That I just get the sense of as well that it's completely to do with the rigidity or how stringently we're holding on to things that create the tension in which we fall upon. There was something else you said there that just made me reflect on my own experience. Isn't it remarkable that you were experiencing all of these things? Anxiety, this internal dialogue or monologue, and all of the, just the general sentiment of where you were in life, and that it's still something in you. It's not like I'll go to a retreat down the road. I'll go to to China to not even book into a kung fu center that's all organized, but that I'll just go and that I'll ask about it. There's For me, it was going to India at a point in my life where I almost felt like I just wanted to fall apart, have the space to fall apart.
mm,
um
mm,
in a in a relatively, in a way that I'd explored things that I felt comfortable falling apart if needs be further. um But just, I don't know, there's something quite remarkable about ending up there where you ended up, in the context of where you sense you were just before.
Mm. Yeah, and that enjoyment of stepping into the unknown, even for that younger, more ignorant George, like I still had that sense of adventure. And often the Taoists talk about become like a child once more. For the child, they're not saying, "I know what that is." Like, this is a tub of peanut butter. I don't need to have fun with this. It's like, well, suddenly for a child, this is, like a steering wheel or a hat, whatever it is. And there's that curiosity, and with curiosity comes openness, and then with openness comes the ability to receive. Because if the ego is like, I know how the world works, I know who I am, then we block ourselves to the opportunities that are there. Then on the falling but not being hurt, there's a funny Taoist story on that. So to the great philosophers of Taoism, you have Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, and then you have Zhuangzi, who wrote a book called named after him. And he has a story of a drunkard who is on the back of a wagon going home from the pub. And then this drunkard is so drunk that they fall off the back of the wagon. But they are so drunk that they don't even know that they're falling, and they land on the ground and they roll away and they're fine, not injured at all. It was a serious fall. And Zhuangzi, the philosopher, is observing this and he says, well, look, that person wasn't hurt because they weren't aware of themselves. Now, if that's possible with alcohol, imagine what is possible when you are at one with the Tao.
I'm obviously just reflecting on my 20s here as well, going, and how profound I must have been then at moments. But there's something so there's something so telling about that, and also the extent of, I don't know, it really is kind of remarkable how much we think we're supporting our own development, or how much we think we're filling our heads up with more content or ideas of who we are. How have you found that process, almost, of, you mentioned letting go of control? Obviously, just from watching a number of videos, even just the practice you mentioned already here, just that moving in between these states of where you started from, and then there's the practice. Can you talk about that sense of either a letting go of who you are or a revealing of who you are, or something of that
Mm,
nature?
mm. It's a yin yang pairing of chaos and order, and to flow with that beautiful dance between yin and yang. So if we were just full unknown chaos, then yeah, it means that okay, we don't have routine, and we find it hard to navigate the modern world, which is required. If you're so flowy that you don't turn up to work for 2 weeks, you're not going to have a job anymore. So there's limits to that. And yet then if we're too in rigidity and order, then we lose the chi, the energy of our lives, because we become like machines. So then the dance of life, and we all have to dance this in our own ways to do both. So for me, today I'm the founder of Balance is Possible, and we have an 11-person team, and I make videos and about Taoist philosophy and our connection with nature, and it invites many hours from me. And I love productivity because I do enjoy to be able to have more impact and to use my time so that I also have time for play. I love learning. And then how do I navigate that? So that's kind of the order and the structure side of the yin yang, is then also really bringing in presence throughout the day. So a really simple, actionable thing that I do, and actually my nervous system gives it to me now, is the single breath. So I feel so grateful that when I notice tension in often my forehead, which is often coming from too much thinking, I then notice that, soften, breathe, down to the belly, relax, come back to being nobody, soften, and then from that place of groundedness, then I take back up the action that I was doing. So then it's a dance. It's flowing between the two. And what I didn't have before is that ability to be no one and to switch off, losing yourself, losing myself. And that is what really meditation gives us, is we're not just doing the practice in the morning for 30 minutes because we should meditate. It's cultivating an energy for life so that we find that presence and that ability to come out of the mind and into the moment more easily.
When did you, just out of interest, start perceiving that more as a an energy for life? There's something uh, that I just find particularly telling in all the, I've interviewed over 300 people around this question. I think there's clearly sometimes a point where people, the practice stops becoming compartmentalized, if you know what I mean. And
Huge.
it's no longer this demarcation between here's my practice and the rest of my day. Just curious for you when that sentiment of an energy for life started to evolve.
Yeah, I had a mentor probably 4 years ago. I've been on the journey 8 years ago. And he, in my coaching session with him, he's like, George, I'm sensing that you're still separating life from practice. So those exact words that you just used. And really that is it's cultivating presence and an approach to life, responsibility, the ability to choose our response, the ability to have spacious, loving awareness to meet all emotions, all thoughts, all parts, all experience. And then from that place of loving awareness, to be able to choose our response, one of wisdom, a bit more wisdom and a bit more kindness. So then it's not just the practices at the start of the day. The practice helps us reach that presence more easily. And certainly, just this is the beautiful thing about the mind and why I do love affirmations. I used to think affirmations were, yeah, my woo woo alarm, woo 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 would be triggered. And I'd be like, what is all of this? Particularly as a British man and sending love to all Americans, but the Americans do it a lot more than the Brits do. And now I really am team affirmation because, so say the affirmation is soften the distinction between life and practice. I soften the distinction between life and practice. I choose presence. I'm inviting that energy into my day. So I do these affirmations maybe before my meditation or after. And the beautiful thing is that the mind begins to then reconfigure. It begins to re-understand what this meditation thing that I'm doing each day is truly about. And then we get deeper into the more nourishing benefits of this practice.
There is a really intriguing connection you just brought up there because I'm sometimes I think I'm going through a phase myself where I'm almost I fell too much into the flow of things, if you know what I mean, and forgot some of the maybe some practical things too that will be required on my journey, like things like earning a living and, and things of this nature.
Yes.
It wasn't important enough until it's become important enough again. But even there, where you said then, and so I think I've kind of demoted the mind. I haven't given it enough respect as to its
Mm,
role, and maybe even at times elements of masculine energy that are required too, or even sentiments of putting, defining things or planning in certain ways to a certain extent, I guess. But also affirmations or ideas of things said in the mind. I've often been quite suspicious of, if you know what I mean. But as you just mentioned there, something I do actually do, and I do notice a tangible experience of life when I do it, is an invitation for my heart to soften.
mm,
And I don't know, there's something really interesting about that, like, because it isn't, I don't know, I guess when the words come, is it from an intention or whatever else? Is it a response to an observation on life? But there is, I don't know, you've just mentioned a really lovely tension that I experience myself sometimes with the dissing of an affirmation and yet actually just a noting of, wow, that actually profoundly moves something in a moment. I was just
mm.
curious from your perspective or your understanding of that.
Thoughts and feelings are messengers of needs. Thoughts and feelings are messengers of needs. So one of the challenges I have of the meditative approach is, super powerful and life changing, as we've already explored, but yeah, the monkey mind, this silly little mind that always gets stuck in the branches and swinging from branch to branch, never resting. And there's almost a denigration of the thinking mind. If we look at ourselves as embodied consciousness and we're part of this evolutionary unfolding of intelligent life, say a plant responds to sensations, an animal has an emotional life, like lizard is fight or flight. Like a lizard, just to distinguish between a mammal and a reptile, a sheep, a little lamb will go ma ma, call out for his mum. If a lizard did that, mum would eat you. So, like it takes a mammal and the prefrontal cortex of a mammal to then risk that vulnerability, ma ma, in order to know that you're a social being and that mum is going to save you instead of eat you. Then we as human beings have thoughts arising in our minds, and dogs, they have dreams, right? They run in their dreams, they have images, but we have advanced language. So if we see then consciousness as this spectrum and this field of different experiences, all of these experiences are signals from the wisdom of the nervous system and the organism to help it survive and thrive. So the same thing with thoughts. Okay, maybe thinking is just repetitive. As Eckhart Tolle says, like 95% of our thoughts are repetitive and unnecessary. That's true. And okay, come back to presence. But if we then spiritually bypass the wisdom that is coming from that thinking, then we trap ourselves, ironically. We actually aren't heeding the wisdom of what the nervous system and the wisdom of consciousness is telling us. So for me, to make a practical example, is yeah, I've spent a lot of time on my mission and filmmaking, and I'd live by myself in cabins in Scotland for months. And then I'd complain to the universe, why are you not bringing me a life partner? Why have I been single for so long? Well, it's because I've been ignoring the thoughts and feelings of, George, I'm lonely and maybe you shouldn't be by yourself in a shack for 3 months. And I've been meditating through them. And I wonder why you're still single. So, there's wisdom to actually listening to those voices. And, like I'm hearing for you, there's a season of, okay, flow, and that felt good. And then, okay, now there's kind of a new chapter in the river, and it's inviting you to, okay, step into finances. So for me, like, this is a season of connection, and I'm dating, and that's feeling good and nourishing. And Georgie, my inner boy, is finally happy, where he can believe me. Whereas before I'd say, I got you, don't worry, mate. And he'd be like, well, you're not taking any action, so I don't actually believe you. And so this is, yeah, that the fundamental yin yang pairing of doing and non-doing, action, non-action. And the Daoist philosophy, and the philosophy for life, for a good life, if it just claims one side of that duality, I think is missing something really important.
And isn't it really delightful to witness that you can also just even, as long as the attention maintains and you're not resisting or denying something, regardless of my case, whether it takes a few years or even for it to become more of a requirement, I guess, like what does this life require of me right now? Or for yourself in a cabin and, going, why am I not meeting anyone? There's something so beautiful and redeeming about this life that now it's just pay attention to that. Like, and it almost it almost offers this, just this constant relating to and being with. And as you kind of said there earlier, that sense of almost the unknown supporting me thing, it kind of echoes something of that as well, that you can trust, even if you do veer too far over wherever, that if you just continue to pay attention, there will be something that will draw you again.
Mm. There's a beautiful story again from Zhuangzi, and he often writes as if he's Confucius, or Confucius is one of his main characters. So Confucius and his disciples are next to a river, looking at this huge waterfall. The waterfall's so big that plumes of mist are seen for miles around. It's a local tourist spot. It's giant. looking at the beautiful view when suddenly they see an old man drop down the waterfall into the churning currents. And Confucius calls out to his disciples, "Go save that man. Maybe he's tried to die by suicide. Go save him." So his disciples are running, taking off all their clothes, when suddenly this old man pops his head out and he's very relaxed, swimming, humming, and singing a song. Eventually, the old man comes to the shore, and Confucius goes to him, like grabs his arm, says, like, I thought you were a ghost, but here you are, flesh and bone. Tell me, what is your secret? Like most people would have died falling down that waterfall. What is your secret? The old man said, "Secret? What do you mean, secret? I've been jumping off the falls for decades. If I had to think about it, not that I do, I guess I just know that the water is so much more powerful than me. So I offer no resistance. When I get pulled down into the depths, I go down with the depths because I know that there will be a reversion, a still point. And in that still point, I do a little kick and I trust that the water will pull me back up. And that is how I have been jumping off the falls for so many decades."
I love that. That's there's something I don't know very gratifying about that. Just from your experience, George, you know the finding yourself, there is something rather, I think, beautiful as well about intending to do kung fu and then it ending up being tai chi. There's something
Mm,
kind of rather delicious, I think, in that even.
mm,
But from even attending that, when did this mission of yours even start to form? Was it arriving there? Was it a realization of what was awakening for you, or how did that begin?
mm. Taoism and Tai Chi began to, yeah, really change my life quite quickly. That first 7 months was really the start of my awakening journey. And I, had those moments of, wow, I'm not my thoughts and not every thought I have is true. That profound realization of really understanding how my mind worked. I didn't have any of the big kind of enlightenment, forever floating on a rock and not being anxious again, and still riding the waves of life, even if they've become softer. And I found that, yeah, like this is really important, and I was never taught this. And why had I not heard of Taoism before? And so that it really was coming from a place of innocence, and I think that's why there was a community that really built around the videos that I made, is because like I really didn't know what I was doing, and that was then relatable because it's like, hey, none of us really know what we're doing, and yeah, I'm making these videos and come along on the way with me. So I call myself a wayfinder. I'm not even a teacher necessarily. I'm on my way, and I hope what I've learned can support you and anyone that interacts with my content on their way. So then from that, it just kept building. I then went back and worked a year in consulting, which is really funny and a real contrast. And then, yeah, went full time in 2020, and yeah, built the team through the online academy, the online Tai Chi academy, and then the filmmaking. And really, yeah, my mission statement is to inspire balance for people and planet. So it's the inside out understanding. I have a big challenge with self development. The idea that if you just meditate and raise your vibrations enough, then you'll heal the world. But yeah, if there's climate breakdown or war, it's going to be pretty hard for us to live in peace. And so, yeah, this necessarily relational and interbeing and interdependent way of seeing healing is what I'm deeply passionate about.
Can you just elaborate more on that interdependent nature of healing? Because this is something I've been noting with so many of the interviews that I've done. There's this a certain self amount of self inquiry, and the attention that a lot of these practices cultivate are wonderful. And yet, I sense that a lot of people can just get stuck in that inquiry and almost viewing ourselves as quite a separate entity. And how do I figure this out about myself? Yet there's something rather profound, I think, where people, that attention becomes more outward looking, and it's not one or the other. It's a moving between. And for that, I've seen, just in either people that I've spoken to or even just some of the observations in my own life, something rather profound, or a softening to life, I think, emerges from it. Just curious from your perspective around interdependence and the
Mm.
significance you place on that in the sense of healing.
Mm. Yeah, beautifully expressed. Seasons is what I find as a really helpful concept. Seasons, to give ourselves the grace of honoring that there are seasons to our lives. So there is a season of really going inwards and trying to understand, what's happening for me. Maybe I'm hurting right now, and there can be quarter life crises, midlife crises. There's crisis in Chinese. It's made up of two characters: danger and opportunity. So it's a transition point. So in those seasons of there's transition, and there's seasons then of inward reflection and really nourishing yourself, because you can't fill another person's cup if your own cup is empty. And then I would love to invite, and what I've experienced fills my life with a load of meaning, is that when I feel like I've done enough of my work, and obviously it's a journey of a lifetime, is to then not just always be analyzing, how am I doing, and like what's my next retreat and healing opportunity, is to then channel that energy of love to be of service to life, understanding that I'm an aspect of life. I'm interconnected in this great web, this magnificent web of billions of humans, all with their own experiences, millions of species of animals with their own wildly different ways of experiencing their lives. When I see that I'm an aspect of all of this, and there's webs of interconnected relationships that makes my being possible. We saw in COVID, right, who are the essential workers? The people on the buses and the supermarkets, not the Instagram managers or people on YouTube. That is really that sense of gratitude to the interconnected web that I am a part of. And when I realize that, then that gives me an energy of love and sense of reverence for this life that I'm a part of. And then that energy of love motivates me to want to be of service. And then, as Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching, through serving the needs of others, our own needs are met. So something that our organism finds deeply meaningful is that when we help others and serve, instead of just focusing on our own success, then we are deeply nourished. So it is also, really a beautiful way to balance. Yeah, okay, but our own healing is super important, but also then can we begin to step out and to contribute, and know that that then creates a gifting set of reciprocal relationships that then nourish everyone involved.
You said something I thought that was particularly telling and also helpful, but giving yourself the grace of experiencing different seasons. Can you say a little bit more on that? Because I think this is something I don't think I often hear enough about. But I think there's something in it that has a lot of acceptance and therefore love in it. I gather.
Mm. In the spring, the flowers open and then they close as seasons. And the heart also has seasons of open and closure. And the closure can happen through, grief, loss of a loved one, or being fired from a job, or for me, financial challenges with, this week, Monday, Tuesday was really challenging for me, anxious, and having payday, pain day, so paying the team and not having enough money and needing a bank loan. So there's like a little season of closure, which I feel like I've moved through mainly over this week. So the heart opens and closes. That is natural, in the same way that the flowers open and close. We then can resist that open and closure. I shouldn't be closed right now. I shouldn't be grieving. I shouldn't be anxious. Another part of my psyche is called the life evaluator. He has a clipboard, a timeline from birth to death. So George, still single, 30 years old, financially insecure. You really should be here by now. So I'm multiplying the pain that I'm experiencing of, okay, maybe there's a longing for love and intimacy, which is important. But then me saying, yeah, you should be further ahead than you are right now, is then just multiplying that pain. So to honor and give ourselves the grace that there are seasons to our lives, seasons to the opening and closing of our hearts, is really meeting ourselves where we are. And that is really the freedom that is possible for us, is meeting the life that's here, saying just here is just okay. And that really is the power of compassion. It's not perfection. Perfection is punishing. It's meeting ourselves where we are.
I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment, and what a beautiful way to describe an essence of love as well. What else could it be other than meeting you or I or whoever else exactly where we are? And then also the capacity, if we're meeting life or meeting others where we are, just the encounter then with aliveness, like a life force. Like, where else could that happen other than meeting life where it is right now? I think there's something really, that addition that you had there to a thought that I had before, of just meeting life where it is. I think there's something profoundly important in that.
And I would argue it's the whole spiritual journey. It's the openness to what's here. It's not about loving more, it's about closing less. And we are
Mm.
already sacred. We're already a magnificent manifestation of the mysterious intelligence of the universe. That is what we are. And then we close because, okay, yeah, we get hurt and we judge and we shut down, and that's part of being human as well. If we can open to the closure, right? Okay, I'm closed right now. Can I be open to that reality of what is alive in this moment? Then that's the real freedom that is possible, and for me is the core of the spiritual journey.
And it's really telling, I think, in out of all these interviews I've done around this question, it's so clear that connection, it's so whether it's talking with a physicist, talking about an ultimate or a deeper reality, a biologist talking about where communities of interdependencies, whether it's with microorganisms or fungi or whatever it is, a human itself is a living community. There's something about this life where it feels far less about the creating something new, creating connection, and more stripping back to the idea that connection is an innate part of this existence. And and even within that, then, just the freedom to accept the moments where we feel disconnected. And I think almost the window that wonder opens up into our experience. Like, that's kind of where our insights are generated from, that openness to the parts that we perhaps don't want to fully meet or accept or to be with. From
Mm,
Yeah, please.
yeah, and just like really, we can play with it. It's like, this flavor of grief is fascinating. Or this anxiety. Wow, what a fascinating experience. It's like to because it creates spaciousness and playfulness of like, wow, I'm really hurting right now. Well, on Monday I was cycling back from university, and yeah, like I started a master's, which is exciting, in global prosperity, and then also just is the team and the place where I can and have that spaciousness. Actually, kind of didn't feel like it has been possible. I've had to reduce the masters, and I just noticed, like, really on the cycle back, like tension, 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 tension. Okay, take a breath. I'm back. Tension, tension, tension. Take a breath. I'm back. Before, I didn't have that ability to take the breath and come back, so that tension would have just increased. And what I noticed, I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot happening for me right now. And what I celebrate in my journey, and it's possible for all of us, is that we can actually even begin to appreciate, if not love, the the qualities of even the more challenging experiences that we face.
this you're mentioning so many things that I think are rather significant. Can you give a sense of how you've come to that? Because I do believe, I've even reflected on recently how boredom is fascinating. Like if I were to ever to be able to say that I'm bored, and with all that goes on in my mind, my body, regardless of what's going on outside of me, like how could I possibly feel bored? Wow, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? And this, but the same too, like with wow, holy shit, that was a rush that I just felt there. Whether it's a spike in anxiety around, something that might an unexpected bill or so, whatever it could be, but just to go, wow, that was a hell of a rush,
Mm,
and it really like it becomes almost like there's a baseline. There can be a baseline of existence that's accessible to us. It's not to escape the human experience, and it's not to expedite ourselves or to resist anything or resist certain elements of this experience. But what you just described there of like tension, 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 and a breath, I'm really intrigued as to when you started to notice that.
mm. Yeah, and kind of, or say like somebody's in deep grief or deep depression, it almost sounds flippant to say, like really enjoy that flavor of depression. Like how does it feel to be with that? And yet there is actually, real depth in that. It's like, actually, can you really honor where you are and to love where you are? And yeah, like in my times of anxiety, that was the one of the biggest healings. It's like I didn't need to run away from that feeling, and actually, can I be with it? And I still sometimes notice the tendency to to watch YouTube videos and to not be with it, and then I eventually come back. So that it's okay to also fall in and out of relationship with our capacity to stay with the challenge. But and again, it's like softness is not perfection. I do really think that's the more accessible teaching here. But there is the potential that we can stay with it, and it's creating more and more experiences of safety, that when I actually stayed with this experience, I was okay. Because really subconsciously or even consciously, there's a fear I can't handle it. I can't stay with this anxiety. I can't, if I really feel the depth of my grief, I'm never going to come back. And really, if we allow ourselves to go there, we connect with the fact that our hearts have the capacity to hold all experience, the 10,000 joys, the 10,000 sorrows. So it's a deeply empowering experience to know, and I do know in my own being that I can be with all of my experience now. Whereas before I thought I was uniquely messed up for being anxious, as I ran away from it. I felt shame about it. And now I'm like, okay, cool. This is just another wave that I'm riding, and oh, this is a painful one. Oh yeah, got lost for quite a while in that one, and now I'm back. And yeah, to again love all stages of that journey of coming into relationship with what's truly here.
I remember interviewing a psychotherapist who was a Zen practitioner for 35 years, I think, at the point of interviewing them. And I was marveling at just some of the things that they were noting about life. And they were quick to remind me, he goes, yeah, but I think sometimes I have the capacity to do this because sometimes I'll consume all of Netflix over a weekend. and, and there's, I don't know, there's something about even when we can't necessarily be with that direct experience that we may sense could be particularly vulnerable or or difficult, even in the acknowledgement that, oh, I'm staying a little bit away from it right here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think just what you're describing there again, that compassion of okay, there's a kind of a strange paradox or contradiction in being aware while avoiding. Do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
resisting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's all just like I stare directly at the sun and just handle it all the
Yeah.
time, which I
Yeah.
which I think, in just that expression you used again there, the falling into then, or the acknowledgement that your heart has handled a lot or could be with a
Mm,
lot, and
mm,
just that trusting again of the unknown supporting me
mm,
from. from your perspective, just intrigued. You mentioned at the start the idea of what is balance, and obviously you mentioned experience in economics, and then also some perspectives on the world ecologically as well. Just when you think of that question of what is balance, and you look at the world around us, or maybe just particular cultures which you're familiar with, where do you sense that we're going to be moving to, or need to move towards, in order for this wider sense of balance to be experienced?
For me, balance is when all the different aspects of life work harmoniously together and continuously adapt as circumstances change. So it's not a fixed thing. It's not like, right, rigidly balanced. Let's say you and I were standing on one leg and I pushed you, and there would be time for you to correct and to come back to equilibrium. So again, the word grace, which is giving ourselves the generosity of meeting ourselves in the world where we are. Balance can be a temporal thing across time. So for like my own life of like, yeah, there's needs, say with partnership and love and intimacy that haven't been met, but I now feel like cool, like I am taking action on this, and so I actually feel I'm in balance now with that, because like I've heeded the words, and now I'm surrendering to, yeah, a person coming into my life, whenever that flows. So then that that is in balance. That is in the flow of how things unfold. So then on the collective level, I love the words of Charles Eisenstein. The story creates the system, and we create the story. So even if we saw climate change, we managed to extract all the carbon dioxide that we've emitted over the last 150 years, we will still be facing resource depletion and colonial exploitation because of the underlying paradigms of superiority of certain countries or the separation of man and nature. So there are, for me, fundamental paradigm shifts that are needed. That, for example, like the aim of society being balance and flourishing and a good life, like your mission, as opposed to economic growth, with the assumption that economic growth will magically solve everything, where we're really seeing just how fundamentally flawed that idea is. So there's so much, and I don't know, I don't know, and it's a collective awakening that all of us need to and have the opportunity to contribute to. And I say my contribution is to, yeah, just to name this word balance, and to invite a more integrative way of seeing ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully kind of summarized. There's from over the course of this conversation, just like the idea of moving, even just from that awareness that it's not a singular household on a that's not connected to an earth. It's not a body that's just being carried around by this robotic kind of capsule, but there's an embodiment here. There's a balance. There's a relationship here. There's a balance to be felt with all that is around us. Gorgeous sentiments around like embracing the unknown. Even this amazing kind of capacity of us to still engage with adventure, even when we're maybe finding our own feet, or experiencing things that you could consider that might get in the way of that. There's still something in us that, not you and I just mean as humans in general, that seeks to still, I don't know, to move maybe towards this greater sense of balance when it's not being experienced. The idea of chaos and order that you've been referring to as well, and the yin and the yang, and giving ourselves grace within, which I think is a profoundly important sentiment around ideas of seasons. And really, I think, a sense of love, of meeting ourselves where we are, so we can be responsive to what our needs are. And I think, just as you've touched on there, the idea of maybe thinking that something could be lacking in our life, I think there's an instantaneous gratification almost in life from just responding. It's not about getting the outcome that, or finalizing the outcome that could deliver that, but it's showing that you've given the world the response to meet that potential, to meet that need potentially. That I think there's almost an immediate piece that can accompany that, irrespective of outcome. And then also this sentiment of just finding balance for the world itself. There's been so many fascinating things as well as beautiful anecdotes as well that you've shared with us, George. Just really curious to hear your answer or response to the question of what is a good life for you?
Hmm. Well, firstly, thank you, Mark, and yeah, just feel your love in this conversation as well, and feel everything that the journey that you've been on, and yeah, the curiosity of wanting to weave together, yeah, ideas of what a good life looks like for to serve, your own life to enjoy, and for community that you're building. And yeah, for me, what is a good life? I do think it's important, for us to enjoy our lives and to joy. Yeah, joyful clarity is the emotional vibration that I seek to express my work at. And yeah, for us not to lose ourselves, for those that are opening our hearts up to the reality of our interdependence, and that includes a lot of pain and trauma and ignorance and injustice. And so in some ways, ignorance is bliss. Like, just don't open yourself up to what's happening. But you and I and our dear listeners are choosing to open ourselves up to what's happening, because it's only with that clarity then we can see clearly to then truly change. I do still think that we can hold joy and enjoy our lives in the midst of all of that. And for me, that's, yeah, to let go of that tension and to come into the body and to come into the present moment and to move and to dance and to play and to be in connection and in community, to be held as social creatures. And then from that foundation of resourcing to then serve and to contribute. I think that yin yang pairing of being and doing, of presence and play, of stillness and service, I think those are beautiful combinations that can truly make for a good life.
You touched on a couple of things there that I think are deeply underappreciated. It's just our significance, the significance of human beings to be held. I think we often look at it as it's a need for children, right? Like, but we never, I don't think we'd ever grow out of that as a need to be met. And
Mm.
whether it's the unknown holding us or just another human being holding us, and just also I think the joy often gets lost in this this journey of inquiry
Yeah,
and
yeah.
jumping into shadows and exercising. I'll be a little dramatic and say exercising demons or whatever it might be, but there's there's another thing that I think we can definitely see in children, but ourselves, like the our capacity to engage with, connect through, and create from. Joy just has a profound experience for us, which I do think through our conditioning we've almost been taught that we need to earn or we need to justify joy. Um, but really, this is I don't know. There's something in us I think that needs to, as well as open up to our potential hurt and pain, our joy as well, because I don't think is something that we naturally come into as much as we think we do. We're
Mm.
capable of feeling pleasure, but I just don't know the extent to which we fully allow ourselves feel joy as well. So, George, look, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed the insights you've shared, the little nuggets of wisdom in different moments as well, and also from your teachings of Taoism as well. So, look, thank you so much for joining us on the What Is a Good Life podcast today. I really look forward to continuing to follow your work as well.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, really grateful to be in presence with you and all our dear listeners as well.